My wife. On top of Derek, still in her lingerie, hair wild, sweat glistening on her chest. Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd be the guy typing this, but here we are. My life feels like some twisted soap opera, and I need to get it off my chest. I'm Ethan, 38M. I run a modeling agency, glamorous on the outside, but trust me, 90% of it is spreadsheets, contracts, and long flights to scout new talent. Through that job, I met my wife, Samantha, 34F. She used to be one of our models. Stunning. Confident. Walked into every room like she owned it. We fell hard, got married, had a daughter. Life was good. But after giving birth, Samantha put on weight. To me, it didn't matter, she was still my wife, the woman I built a life with. But to her, it was everything. She'd stare at herself in the mirror, sigh, and say stuff like, "Bet you'd rather be with one of your skinny models." At first, I thought it was insecurity talking. I reassured her a million times, I loved her, not the women on billboards. But the jabs kept coming. Then came the walks. The wine nights, that stretched until 1 a.m. The sudden obsession with dressing up when I was out of town for work. The first time I asked her why Derek, our next-door neighbor, was at the house while I was away, she laughed in my face. "Don't be paranoid, Ethan. He's just helping with the fence." God, you're so insecure. I wanted to believe her. I told myself I was imagining things, that my job surrounded me with too much beauty and it warped my brain. But deep down I knew something was off. And when the truth finally smacked me in the face, it was uglier than anything I'd imagined. It happened on a Thursday night. I had just flown back early from a scouting trip in Chicago. I didn't tell Samantha because I wanted to surprise her, maybe grab dinner, show her I still cared. When I pulled into the driveway, Derek's truck was there. My stomach dropped. I walked inside, quiet. The house was dim, our daughter asleep at my mom's for the night. I headed upstairs, and that's when I heard it, soft laughter, the creak of our bed, the kind of sound that hits you in the gut before your brain catches up. I pushed the door open. There she was. My wife. On top of Derek, still in her lingerie, hair wild, sweat glistening on her chest. She froze, but not fast enough. His hands were on her hips, gripping her like she belonged to him. For a second, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Samantha had the audacity to smirk. "Ethan, you weren't supposed to be home until tomorrow." Like I was the one intruding. I stood there, numb, while Derek scrambled for his clothes. He muttered some apology and bolted out of the house, leaving me alone with her. I'll never forget the look in her eyes. Not guilt. Not fear. Annoyance. Like I'd ruined her fun. And in that moment I realized, it wasn't insecurity driving her. It was entitlement. She wanted me to believe she was jealous of my models, when the truth was, she'd been using Derek as her escape all along. I didn't even know what to say at first. My body was shaking, my chest tight like someone had wrapped a vice around my ribs. Finally I managed. "How long, Samantha?" She rolled her eyes, pulled the blanket over herself like I was invading her privacy. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It just happened. A few times. It's not what you think. Not what I think. I just walked in on you screwing our neighbor in my bed." "What the hell do you mean, not what I think?" She sighed, bitch, a tone cranked to full volume. "You're never home, Ethan. You're always flying around with your little models, acting like I don't exist. Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't need someone else." That one cut deep. She'd flipped it. Turned her betrayal into my fault. "You're blaming me?" I snapped. "For your choices? For you dragging Derek into this house, into our marriage, into our bed?" She shot me a look of pure contempt. "At least Derek makes me feel wanted. You treat me like some washed-up mom while you surround yourself with 20-year-old beauties. What did you expect would happen?" My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth would crack. I wanted to scream. To smash something. But instead, I just stared at her, realizing this wasn't the woman I married. This was someone else. Someone cruel. Someone who could betray me, then sneer at me like I was pathetic for caring. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring at the dark, while upstairs she slept like a baby in the bed she just desecrated. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if I had ever really known her at all. The next few weeks nearly destroyed me. I'd get up in the morning, splash water on my face, stare into the bathroom mirror, and barely recognize the man looking back. Hollow eyes. Stubble from nights I didn't care enough to shave. The guy who built a business, who provided for his family, who thought he had it all, he was gone. Instead, I felt like a clown. The modeling agent who couldn't even keep his own wife faithful. The man whose neighbor, of all people, had been sneaking into his bed. Melissa, my sister, noticed first. She came over to drop off some things for our daughter and pulled me aside. You look like hell. What's going on? I wanted to tell her. God, I wanted to unload it all. But the shame was so heavy I just muttered. Work stress. At work, I put on the mask. Meetings, castings, networking events, all smiles and handshakes. But every time I looked at the women in the room, the ones Samantha claimed I was obsessed with, I heard her words in my head. At least Derek makes me feel wanted. Was I that cold? That boring? Had I let myself become invisible in my own marriage? The worst moments were at night. When the house was quiet and my daughter was asleep, my brain would run laps around itself, imagining Samantha and Derek together. Her laugh. The sounds I'd heard upstairs that night. And then her words. Maybe if you paid more attention. I started to believe it. That maybe I really wasn't enough. That maybe all my success, all my loyalty, all my sacrifices meant nothing because I'd failed at the one role that should have mattered most, husband. But slowly, that grief began to curdle into something else. Because the truth was, it wasn't that I wasn't enough. It was that she was too damn selfish to see my worth. And the more I realized that, the more my sadness started turning into fire. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. I was mowing the lawn, sweat dripping, earbuds in, when I noticed Derek's blinds twitch. He was standing there, watching me, smirking like a man who thought he'd won. That was it. Something inside me snapped. The grief, the humiliation, the sleepless nights replaying their moans, all of it hardened into rage. That night, I walked into the bedroom where Samantha was scrolling Instagram in bed. We need to talk, I said. She didn't even look up. About what now? Are you still crying over Derek? God, Ethan, grow a spine. Her words hit me, but instead of crushing me, they lit me up. I pulled her phone right out of her hands, opened the messages I'd already seen. Explicit texts, photos, Derek calling her my girl. I held the screen up to her face. This is who you are now. This is what you've turned our marriage into. She rolled her eyes. So what? You want a medal for catching me? Maybe if you weren't off drooling over 20-year-old models, I wouldn't have needed Derek. I didn't shout. I didn't smash her phone. I just smiled, calm, cold. You've mistaken my silence for weakness, Samantha. But I promise you, I won't be your fool much longer. She laughed, actually laughed, and said, Please. You'd never survive without me. That was the moment I knew what I had to do. Not beg. Not cry. Not even fight with her anymore. I was going to make her pay. Not just for the cheating, but for every insult, every sneer, every time she tried to make me feel like I wasn't enough. I was done being the fool. It was time to be the fire. After that night, I stopped reacting and started planning. While Samantha strutted around the house acting like queen of the cul-de-sac, I was quietly turning myself into a one-man private investigator. First step, the phone. I already had screenshots of their messages, but I dug deeper. Cloud backups, hidden albums. Sure enough, photos of her in lingerie I'd never seen, selfies in Derek's garage, even one with his damn dog in the background. Second step, timing. I started keeping track of when she left the house, when Derek's truck pulled up, when the lights went out next door. Patterns emerged. Every time I traveled, they turned it into a free-for-all. Third step, the neighbors. Derek's wife, Natalie, worked nights as a nurse. She had no idea what was going on under her own roof. A few friendly conversations later, and I confirmed, she suspected nothing. That made me sick. She was out saving lives while her husband was busy ruining mine. I put it all together in a neat little folder. Dates, screenshots, photos, receipts. Not just proof. A weapon. The kind of weapon that doesn't just end a marriage, it detonates it. Meanwhile, Samantha thought I was crumbling. She tossed snide comments like, "You look tired, Ethan. Maybe you should travel more. The house is quieter without you." I bit my tongue. Smiled even. Because every word she said, every insult she threw, just made me sharpen the blade a little more. And when the time came, I wasn't just going to cut her down. I was going to burn her perfect little image to the ground. The perfect chance came sooner than I expected. Derek and Natalie invited the whole neighborhood over for a summer barbecue. Burgers, beers, kids running around, the kind of event where everyone plays happy families. Samantha insisted we go. She put on a sundress, curled her hair, and looked me dead in the eye before we left. "Let's try not to be awkward tonight, okay?" Like she wasn't sneaking around with the host behind my back. The irony almost made me laugh. By the time the sun went down, half the block was in Derek's backyard. Samantha was sipping wine, laughing too loudly at Derek's dumb jokes, while Natalie flipped burgers like the perfect hostess. That's when I pulled out my phone. "Hey everyone," I said, raising my voice just enough to cut through the chatter. "Since we're all neighbors here, I thought it'd be a good time to share a little slideshow." Confused smiles. A few laughs. Then I connected my phone to the outdoor projector Derek had set up for the kids' movie later. First photo, Samantha in lingerie, posing in Derek's garage. Gasps. Murmurs. Second photo, a screenshot of Derek texting. "Can't wait till he's out of town again. Last night was..." Natalie dropped the spatula. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" Third photo, Samantha in our bed, clearly not alone. The backyard went dead silent. Samantha shot up, face white, hissing, "Ethan! Turn it off right now." I looked at her, calm as ice. "Why? You weren't worried when the whole neighborhood could hear you laughing with him. Why stop now?" Natalie burst into tears. Derek tried to stammer something, but no one was listening. The neighbors, the same people Samantha loved to impress, were staring at her like she was dirt. For the first time in years, she didn't look smug. She looked small. And I savored every second. The backyard turned into chaos after that slideshow. Natalie stormed inside, screaming at Derek. You could hear glass shattering from the kitchen. Their kids were crying. The neighbors were whispering, some just flat out staring at Samantha like they were watching a car wreck in slow motion. And Samantha? She tried to save face. She grabbed my arm, nails digging into my skin, and hissed, "Do you realize what you've done? You've embarrassed me in front of everyone." I ripped my arm free. "You embarrass yourself the second you brought him into our bed." She tried to laugh it off, her go-to defense. "Oh, please. Everyone here knows how lonely I've been. Ethan's never around. What was I supposed to do?" But nobody was nodding. Nobody was sympathizing. Not a soul backed her up. Even her so-called friends were looking at her like she was toxic. Natalie came back out, red-eyed, holding Derek's phone. She shoved it in Samantha's face and spat. "You weren't even the only one. He's been screwing half the office too. Congratulations, you're just another name on the list." Samantha's face crumbled. The queen bee who thought she was untouchable suddenly realized she was nothing more than a punchline. I didn't wait around. I dropped my beer in the trash, walked out of that yard, and left her standing there with everyone watching her fall apart. That night, I slept on the couch, not because I had to, but because I wanted her to know she was already out of my bed forever. By morning, Natalie had kicked Derek out. Half the neighbors had cut Samantha off. And me? For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The humiliation was no longer mine. It was hers. The Monday after the barbecue, I walked into my lawyer's office with a thumb drive full of evidence. Screenshots, photos, timestamps, the whole ugly collection. My lawyer barely had to skim it before saying, "She doesn't stand a chance." Filing was easier than I thought. Almost therapeutic. Like putting the final nail in a coffin that should have been buried months ago. When I handed Samantha the papers at the kitchen table, she exploded. "You can't be serious! You're really going to throw away 20 years because of one mistake?" "One mistake?" I shot back. "It wasn't one mistake, Sam. It was 6 months of sneaking around with the neighbor. 6 months of mocking me while I worked to give us everything. You didn't trip and fall into his bed, you sprinted." She switched tactics fast. Tears. Snot. The whole act. "Please, Ethan." I was lonely. I felt ugly after the baby. Derek made me feel seen. "I never stopped loving you." But then the mask slipped again. She sneered. "And what woman is going to want you, huh? The boring guy who spends all his time with models but still got cheated on. You're pathetic." I didn't even flinch. I just slid the pen across the table. "Sign it, Sam. The only pathetic thing here is you thinking you'd get away with it." The divorce was finalized quicker than either of us expected. The judge barely had patience for her crocodile tears once my lawyer laid out the evidence. I kept the house, custody of our daughter, and my business untouched. She walked out with nothing but her bitterness and a reputation in ashes. And for the first time since I caught her in that bed, I felt like the fool's mask had finally come off. After the papers were signed, the house felt quiet. Not the heavy, suffocating kind of quiet from before, but a calm one. No more waiting for her car to pull into the driveway at midnight. No more pretending not to smell another man's cologne on her. Just me, my daughter, and peace. My little girl was my anchor through it all. She was too young to fully understand, but kids know more than we give them credit for. One night she looked at me and said, "I like when you put me to bed, Daddy. You don't forget the silly voices." That one hit me hard. Because while Samantha was chasing attention next door, I was the one actually showing up. I was the constant. And that meant more than any affair, any insult, any betrayal. My family rallied too. My sister Melissa checked in constantly, my dad came over to help fix up the backyard, my mom brought meals like I was in recovery, which I guess I was. Not from surgery, but from 20 years of lies. At work, my team noticed I seemed lighter. One of my assistants even said, "You look 10 years younger." Maybe it was because I was finally sleeping. Or maybe because I didn't have to carry her betrayal in silence anymore. The nights were still rough sometimes. I'd wake up angry, replaying the slideshow in my head, hearing her laugh, hearing her sneer about Derek making her feel wanted. But every morning I looked at my daughter's face, I remembered I wasn't broken. She was. And now I had a choice, to rebuild myself, not for Samantha, not for Derek, not even for revenge anymore. But for me. After the dust settled, I looked in the mirror one morning and hated what I saw. Not just physically, though the sleepless nights and stress had definitely carved lines into my face, but the hollow look in my eyes. Samantha had made me believe I was less than, and I realized I'd been carrying her poison long before I caught her. So I made a promise, no more. I started with the gym. At first, I could barely drag myself through a mile on the treadmill. But week after week, I pushed harder. The weights got heavier, my runs got longer, and the hollow look in my eyes started to fade. Instead, there was fire. Then I signed up for boxing classes. Every punch I threw into the bag felt like I was knocking down Derek's smug grin, Samantha's sneers, every insult she'd ever spat at me. My trainer said, Man, you've got a lot of fight in you. I just smiled. He had no idea. Work changed too. Instead of dragging myself through the motions, I doubled down. Expanded the agency, picked up new clients, started traveling again, not to escape, but to live. When I was scouting in Miami, I actually took a day to walk the beach, grab a drink, watch the sunset. Something I'd never let myself do before. And for the first time in years, I felt good. Strong. Not the broken man who'd sat in his living room wondering why he wasn't enough, but someone new. Every step forward was proof. She didn't break me. She just freed me to rebuild into something better. Once I started rebuilding, the world opened up in ways I hadn't imagined. Travel used to be a burden. Samantha would sulk when I left, accuse me of flirting with models, and guilt-trip me for abandoning the family. Now, my trips felt like freedom. I wasn't running away from anything. I was running toward life. In New York, after a long casting session, I took a walk through Central Park and realized I wasn't rushing back to a cold house. In LA, I grabbed dinner with old college buddies I hadn't seen in years because Samantha always called them losers. In Miami, I stayed an extra night just to go fishing with a client who turned out to be more of a friend than half the people I'd known back home. Back in my hometown, I reconnected with friends I'd drifted from. We started having poker nights again. My sister Melissa joked, "You laugh more now than you did in the last 5 years with her." She wasn't wrong. The neighbors too, funny enough, people I used to barely nod to at the mailbox, started inviting me over. Not just out of pity, but because without Samantha, I wasn't walking around like a man chained to his own house. And the wild part? I realized I didn't miss her. Not her presence, not her laugh, not even her company. The only thing I missed was the man I used to be before her betrayal, and I was finding him again, piece by piece. For the first time, I felt something I hadn't in years. Happiness. And it wasn't because of anyone else. It was because of me. It happened at the grocery store of all places. I was grabbing stuff for my daughter's sleepover, snacks, sodas, the works, when I heard a voice behind me. "Ethan?" I turned, and there she was. Samantha. Except she didn't look like the woman I remembered. The sundress, the hair curled to perfection, the smug grin she wore like armor, all gone. She was in sweatpants, hair tied up in a messy bun, eyes tired and dull. She looked smaller. She gave me this half-smile. "It's been a while." I nodded, kept my voice flat. "Yeah. It has." She tried to strike up conversation. Asked about our daughter, about work, even tossed in a bit a little. "Bet the models are keeping you busy." But it was different this time. There was no power in her words. No bite. Just envy. Finally, she sighed and said it. "I made a mistake, Ethan. Derek wasn't what I thought. He's broke, his wife took everything in the divorce, and he's already moved on." I just stared at her. This was the same woman who once sneered, "At least Derek makes me feel wanted." And now she was standing in front of me, abandoned by the man she'd thrown everything away for. Part of me expected to feel vindicated, triumphant. But all I felt was nothing. She was already living her punishment. As I turned to leave, she called after me. "Do you ever think we could, try again?" I didn't even stop walking. "No, Samantha. Some things don't get second chances." And with that, I left her standing there, in the cereal aisle, next to the frosted flakes, looking like the ghost of the woman she used to be. Walking away from Samantha in that grocery store was the real closure I didn't know I needed. It wasn't the barbecue exposure, it wasn't the divorce papers, it was seeing her beg for scraps of the life she destroyed, and realizing I no longer cared. From that point on, I stopped looking back. I leaned into the things I'd put on hold for years. Picked up photography, something I'd always been interested in but Samantha used to call a waste of time. Bought a camera, started shooting landscapes on my trips, even did portraits for friends' families. It grounded me, gave me a new lens, literally and figuratively, to see the world. I also started hiking every weekend with my brother Tyler. We'd wake up at dawn, pack some sandwiches, and spend hours on the trails. Every step felt like I was leaving another piece of her poison behind. Then there was travel. Real travel. Not just business trips. I took my daughter to Paris for her birthday, her dream. Watching her eyes light up at the Eiffel Tower, eating croissants by the river, hearing her laugh louder than I had in years, that was the moment I realized, this was the life I should have been living all along. And yeah, I even dipped a toe back into dating. Nothing serious yet, but I met a woman through a mutual friend. She's not a model. Not a showpiece. She's real, funny, kind, sharp. For the first time, I don't feel like I have to prove myself to someone. I'm not Ethan the fool anymore. Not Ethan the husband of a model. Just Ethan. And honestly, that's enough. It's been over a year since I caught Samantha with Derek. Sometimes I still get flashbacks, the creak of the bed, her smirk when she said, "You weren't supposed to be home." Those memories sting, but they don't break me anymore. Because here's what I've learned, her cheating didn't prove I wasn't good enough. It proved she wasn't. For years, she chipped away at me with little digs, too boring, too busy, too distracted by models. And I believed her. I thought maybe I really was the problem. But in the end, her actions showed the truth. It wasn't about me being less. It was about her never being satisfied with more. Revenge had its moment, exposing her at that barbecue, watching her image implode in front of the whole neighborhood. That was satisfying. But the real victory wasn't that night. It was the months that followed, when I rebuilt myself, piece by piece, until I didn't even recognize the broken man she left behind. Now, I'm stronger, healthier, happier. A better dad, a better brother, even a better version of myself. Samantha is a ghost of her old self, clinging to excuses, while I'm finally living. So if you're reading this because you're in the same place I was, betrayed, humiliated, crushed, here's my advice. 1. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it usually is. 2. Don't let them flip it on you. Cheaters love to rewrite the story. Don't buy it. 3. Gather your proof. Not just for revenge, but to free yourself cleanly. 4. Expose when needed. Sometimes the only way to kill a lie is to drag it into the light. 5. Rebuild for you. Find hobbies, travel, reconnect with people who actually value you. They thought I'd be destroyed. But the truth? Samantha and Derek were the best mistakes that ever happened to me. Because without their betrayal, I never would have found out how strong I really am. And that's something no one can take from me. I have many other stories. Go to my channel, subscribe so you don't lose us. Give me a thumbs up.